Hi, I'm Becky Meagher, and welcome to Transitions Body, Mind, Spirit. Transitions. We have so many transitions in our life. I like to use the metaphor of triathlon, something that I was just in Louisville and did 2 weeks ago. In a triathlon, the first thing you do is swim. And then you finish that and you get to a transition area and change totally, and then you bicycle. And then you transition again, and then you run. And that's a metaphor for how things are changing in our lives. And today we're going to be talking about the bike portion of that, which is pretty interesting. We have some very interesting bikes for people to see. Some are more complicated than others, and one is kind of the Rolls-Royce of bicycles. And we have some amazing guests here also. We have the owner of Endeavor Performance, Todd Nordmeyer.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
And then we have an amazing, colorful man who has not only a PhD in English literature, but also bikes at Endeavor Performance, and is going to explain his simple but very tough bike also. Welcome all. Welcome. Glad you're here. And before we actually get up and show some of the bicycles, I want to remind people that if you have a bicycle, something that you should have is a helmet if you're bicycling. And this is just a pretty plain helmet, but there's lots of different kinds. And Todd can tell us a little bit about a few of the different helmets that are available.
Yeah, so helmets they come in obviously different sizes, different shapes, based on just airflow is a critical one in terms of just how cooling it is to your head, the shape from an aerodynamic standpoint, and then also just there's a lot of helmets now that are made just to help prevent concussions if you were to fall. So that's basically what you have, and then the weight of the helmet. Lighter helmets are usually more expensive. It's amazing what in cycling where you pay less for something, you pay more for something less weight. That's less of something. So it's, but yeah, that's really the differences in the helmets.
All right. And then the other thing that people may not realize is this is an example of a shoe that has a little thing on the bottom and it clips in. So when you're going, when you're pedaling, you really have more strength to it. So explain that.
Yeah, so this is what they call a clipless pedal system, and that's basically, it means it's not something else, but you do actually clip in. It's just that back in the day before they had this type of pedaling, this type of pedal system, riders would have clips that would go into, that you would slip your shoe into. So this is called a clipless pedal system. This one is actually cool because you can actually walk on. As you know, you can walk on concrete and not feel like you're going to slip. So, and there's other pedal systems that the cleat is actually external of the shoe, and it's harder to walk on. But most people, I'd say, starting out or new or want to be recreational, have a system like this. Mm-hmm. Not that you're recreational, but
well, and then also the whole idea when you are in that you have more torque.
It's just that you're able to push harder into the pedal, mm-hmm. more of the pedal stroke. So the pedal stroke obviously is from top to bottom. You know, that's where the power is going to be generated or the power is going to be transferred to, and this allows you to do more of that without slipping.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can also de-weight the pedal on the upstroke without your foot coming off the pedal.
Yes.
Right. So if you're taking weight off of the foot that's coming up, that's not doing the work. Mm-hmm. All right. If we do that on a regular bike with just flat pedals, to the extent that you would do it on a bike where you're clipped in, your foot might lose traction on the pedal, and fall off, slip off, something like that. Just makes the whole thing more efficient, less to have to think about, really
I mean, you
plugged
can
in.
make an argument that it's actually safer than a platform pedal, just because of what Will's saying. Is like the faster you pedal, there's a greater chance of you slipping that foot shoe coming off.
Right.
Yeah, and these shoes are designed to be stiffer, and that's important too in cycling, to have a stiff sole shoe.
Yeah.
Just lessen the chance of getting injured.
What do you say to the people that I've talked to that have never done that and said, oh, I'm afraid I can't get my foot out? What would you say?
Yes, I would say that it does take practice. It does take some patience with yourself. And it's good to have someone who has some experience to help you. There's that. Again, it's amazing. We've at some point we've fallen at some point, right? I mean, on a cycle. So it's amazing that people think, okay, I'm going to end up injuring myself because I'm clipped in, but you don't injure yourself. At least most people will not injure themselves because they're clipped in. That's usually they're going to clip out pretty quickly. It's sort of a natural reflex, or if you stay clipped in, it's unlikely that you're actually going to hurt yourself because you are clipped in.
Yeah, I mean, the people, you never unclip, well, I won't say never, but rarely unclip when you're actually riding the bike, right? The stoplight's the thing, right? And I mean, really what it is, when you get the thing on the pedal, it's just it's a side, click and pop out, right? So, I mean, maybe you have the one or two, the one tip over or something like that.
Right.
But, with enough practice beforehand, it's not that big a deal. But you're right, some people do have sort of, I would consider it to be kind of an irrational fear of that. But I think, those people are making it out to be a much bigger deal than it actually is. Super easy to get used to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to demonstrate a couple. We have 3 different bicycles, and I want to ask these two when they first started bicycling and what did they have? Like, Will, what did you start out as?
Well, I mean, it depends on what we were just talking earlier about what we mean by start out, right? Because my first bike, I mean, I think it came from Walmart, and it was blue, and it was about this big. It was awesome. I got to ride with my friends. It was great. Now, the first sort of real bike I had sort of a mountain bike in college that was just, run of the mill, and I met some guys who had track bikes, which are sort of single speed. At least at the time, I thought it was like the fastest, wildest bike I'd ever been on, and I had to get one. So I guess maybe the first thing where I would say I got into cycling was probably an old track bike.
Which we're going to show you.
I brought one, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And then what about you?
I would say again, I'm going to define it as like when I first got into road cycling, and this is when I was in high school, and it was just, I purchased a $300 Japanese bike called Nishiki, and it was a 12-speed bike, and it was a road bike that I actually started racing on in high school. And I mean, prior to that, I had a background in BMX, but that was my first road bike, road racing bike.
All right. And if I didn't mention it before, Todd became a professional cyclist also. In addition, now he owns the Endeavor Performance. So it graduated from BMX all the way to racing. So interesting aside.
Thanks.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, first of all, Todd, would you bring in my bicycle?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Becky, you want to get up and take a look at this thing?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the bicycle that I use personally, and this is what I use to do my triathlons on, and it's not a pure triathlon bike. It's a medium. It's maybe what I paid, $2,800 for this. But it's been tricked out, and Todd does something called fitting a bike to your body. And he also, this is fit to my size. And then also right here, he changed this whole thing. I'm going to let you explain what you did to my bike to make it faster and better for me to do triathlons.
Sure. So again, bike fitting is fitting the bike to the athlete, and it's not necessarily like we're trying to fit the athlete to the bike. So all that to say is that basically we're trying to create this bike to fit you, to make you feel neutral. Neutral means comfortable, not in tension. So the crankset, which is what you were pointing to, what we did for you is we shortened the crank arm length. That's the length of this crank arm. This is called a crank arm, and so we shortened that. So that basically helps you to pedal really more faster without basically from a biomechanical standpoint, it's not preventing you to pedal faster. I mean, pedal slower. It's preventing you to. It's helping you pedal faster. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's what we focus a lot on for you. And that is, it's very beneficial, and that's sort of what's been the trend for many years now. The trend is to take it shorter crank arm lengths.
Okay, that's the trend.
Pedal in smaller circles.
Yes.
Uh-huh. All right. And then also, this is called a saddle. And I had an ancient saddle that Todd threw away. And then he said, oh, this is terrible, when I had my last bike fit. And then 5 or 6 saddles later, finally, I got something that fit me. So how important is it to have a saddle that fits?
I say, as my business as a fitter, the saddle's number one. It's the first thing to get right. It's the most important thing, and the reason for that is because obviously it's your butt. There's a lot of soft tissue there that needs not to be injured, and that's probably why a lot of people that have a bike probably don't ride their bike because of the saddle. It's ill-fitted. It's not the correct saddle, or it's just not the right position. So all that to say is that this is the most important thing to get right, because if that's not right, then nothing else on the bike can be right, because this is where you're anchoring your body into that place right there.
Right.
So it's very important. And so for you, we went through a couple saddles, which is really common to do that, and we found one that worked well for you, that supported I would say your pelvic structure.
Right.
Instead of soft tissue.
So I'm very, very, very happy with this Cannondale and all the tricks that you did. So that's good. So we have another wonderful bike.
Are we going to look at mine?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
I'll
Can
go
we
get
do this?
your bike.
Yes.
Yeah, I actually don't ride this one that much anymore. The main bike I ride is a road bike. But when we were talking, you asked what kind of bikes really got me sort of interested in bikes, and it'd be a bike like this. So this is a track bike, and a couple of things about the track bike. This is what all the guys in college who were like bike messengers were using, and it's got a couple of features that are radically different from other bikes. It's really simple. First off, it's a fixed gear. So you can't change gears, right? You notice there's no shifters up here or anything like that. Actually, no wires at all. It doesn't even have brakes, but I'll get to that. So the chain essentially just goes from the chain ring back to the cog, and there's no what's the word I'm looking for?
No freewheeling.
Yeah, there's no freewheel. So if you pedal backwards, it pedals backwards. You pedal forwards, it pedals forwards. You can't coast on these bikes. And they use these in velodrome races, essentially. Right? We're talking about with the round track seen in the Olympics. So one of the things that you have to do is you have to learn how to pedal fast, and you have to learn how to pedal with the particular gear. Now the thing that I liked about it was one that they looked really dangerous, and I was really into that. And these types of bikes are built with really twitchy geometry, which means generally the wheels are closer than they'll be on road bikes generally. And so that has the effect of it really feeling like you're riding on top of the bike instead of in the bike. And the steering is really twitchy. It sort of wants to do this, right? So they turn really quickly. It's good for like going through traffic and things like that. But the coolest thing about them is that if you don't have brakes, which is irresponsible. I know. I'm sorry. This is not. I'm not a hero. Is that you skid the tires, and you do these crazy sort of whip skids and stuff like that, and anyway. So I would probably describe it as sort of the difference between a stick shift car, or a manual transmission, and an automatic. Although that's not a perfect metaphor, but they're just fun to ride. I mean, I can't do it for very long distances. I can't do it and I ride my road bike most of the time, but sometimes if I just want to take a spin into town, they're just fun. They're really simple, nothing on them breaks, and I don't have clipless pedals on this one. I actually have BMX pedals with straps on it, but you absolutely need foot retention with these. And I put these big, deep track bars on here so that you might notice that the position on this bike is pretty aggressive. The saddle to bar drop. So these are not really meant to be ridden really long distances. They're purely just for, or at least the ones that, for Olympic velodrome races are just purely for speed.
It looks really comfortable.
Yeah, it's...
Not.
Do you want to try it out? Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so like I said, I don't ride this very often. Probably the comfort factor does have something to do with it.
Is this seat
saddle
work
yeah.
for you?
Yeah, it is.
It's a sliver of a saddle.
Well, it's not that, yeah, and it looks like it's really high. But another thing too is that these have really short crank arms. So these are 160s, which is about the shortest you can get. And so it effectively is going to make your leg length has to go all the way up, so that saddle ends up coming up. So again, that's another thing that makes it feel like you're kind of, on a tightrope up there, among other things. Anyways, a little weird bike, but these are the kind of bikes that got me into cycling, and now I use almost exclusively use a road bike or a kind of racing bike. But these are still fun to have around and to kick around, and then to show people on television.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And now we have the third bike,
All right.
which is kind of like the
careful with
Maserati of bikes, or it's a very high-end bike compared to the two that you all have just seen.
Look at it.
And this is a real beauty. And Todd's going to tell us all about it because we all want to know.
Okay, so this is a full-on racing bike. This is what the professional cyclists, competitive cyclists would ride. We talked about the Tour de France. This is the kind of bike that they would ride. Now, there's a lot more to this bike in terms of the componentry. And componentry is basically like you would describe the saddle or even the pedals as components. So when I say componentry, I'm talking about a particular part of the bike. Some of these parts are they're very extravagant, but they're very nice. And probably as a professional cyclist, they probably would not use those just because they're hard on their bikes. And this is sort of like, hey, I'm getting a racing bike, but I'm going to add a little bit more fluff to it to make it even more awesome.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you kind of show us part by part, like from the saddle to, what are we looking at here?
Yes. Okay. So the crazy thing about this bike.
And you might want to kind of look a little bit more toward the camera.
Okay. Yes. The crazy thing about this bike is that the cables here are internally routed. So that means they're going inside the bar, inside the stem, and they're going inside the frame. That's why you don't see any cables.
Okay.
Now that's the brakes, which are here. They're called disc brakes. Disc brakes are basically like you have a disc brake on a car. They stop really well. They stop really well in wet conditions, and they are just they're really cool in the sense of that they really give you a lot of braking power. Mm-hmm. Now, the other cool thing about this is that this particular bike has electronic shifting. And electronic shifting is different than mechanical shifting because, mechanical shifting, you're using mechanical means to move what's called the derailleurs. So these derailleurs have servos that are electronically driven. So when they move, they're moved by a battery powered. And the battery actually is right inside here.
Wow.
There's a little battery that goes right here, and that's basically sending, when you press the button, it's sending, obviously, telling that servo to shift and that one to shift.
Wow.
So that's really cool. That's electronic shifting. That's sort of like what is considered sort of norm now. I mean, that when you're getting into sort of mid to high end bicycles, both mountain biking and road biking, you're getting mostly into electronic shifting these days.
Yeah, and it's different from an e-bike, though. It's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just the shifting itself has a little servo motor that moves the derailleurs. So where the cable, like on your bike, right? You've got a tension cable that sort of pushes through the housing and pushes the mechanical thing. This thing has a little motor, and you can hear them just zzz, 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 right, that moves. That'll move the gears. All right, but it doesn't assist in the work that you have to do on the bike. I
Okay.
guess, which
Does
is,
the Tour de France people, do they have that electronic
Yes,
shifting?
they all do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then go ahead. More.
Yeah, just a couple things. So this saddle, again, this is a very nice saddle in terms of that it's 3D printed.
Yeah.
And that is, again, that's something that is really, it's got a lot of coolness factor to it. It's got a lot
3D
of, hey,
printed.
I need to buy that because it's 3D printed.
feels great.
Yeah, it feels great. You touch it, it feels great. What else? The bearings, which are basically in here. There's bearings here. There's bearings in the pedals. There's bearings in the hubs. So these bearings, and there's bearings are friction, so they obviously they need to be really smooth, and they're really high quality bearings. And they're made out of ceramic. Ceramic bearings are really just have really low friction. So that it has basically of anything, almost anything you can think of, it has. This light, this is a really cool feature. This light is made by a company that it sends a signal to your computer. There's a computer here that you can see that as a car is approaching, it will signal telling you how close the car is.
Really?
Yeah.
It's essentially like a radar detector.
It's like a radar detector, and as you get closer, as the car gets closer to you, the light actually flashes brighter and faster.
Oh.
And they just came out with a new model that actually has a camera to it, so it's recording your ride from behind.
Oh, in case
so
somebody
if something
wants
were to happen,
clip you.
unfortunately, if something were to happen, you would have it on. Obviously, it would be recorded.
It's very high tech.
Yeah, that's a great feature. That has changed a lot of people's lives in terms of feeling more comfortable to ride outside.
It's not prohibitively expensive either. I think
No,
I have one. I wouldn't ride without it. It's super.
You have one?
Yeah. Oh,
It's $200, about $200. There's an upgraded one, like with the web camera, that's a little bit more expensive. But the other cool thing is say, like, if you and I rode together and I had one, you can sync your head unit, your computer to that, and whatever. So basically, what that would mean is, whenever a car was coming to me, you would know.
Huh.
So, like, for instance, if you were in front of me and a car was coming, you would see that signal on your computer because you were synced up to this unit.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
multiple riders can sync up to one unit.
Yeah. You never get surprised by cars coming up from behind you.
That's
Yeah.
great.
It's
Now,
great.
It's a big feature.
What about these tires?
Yeah, so tires come in obviously different shapes. The tire compound on this is super. The softness of it makes it tacky. So a tacky tire means that it obviously grabs a hold onto the road really well. Also, it's what they use, a word they call suppleness. So the tire is more supple, so it's going to bend into the road better, and it's going to make that ride softer, and it's actually going to make it faster.
Okay. All right. And if I were to buy something like this, what does a ballpark about this cost?
This bike would be around $12,000.
Okay. Okay. And then the pedals too. It says carbon.
It is a carbon. So carbon is really the material now that's being used throughout the cycling industry. it's basically, we can point to a lot of things on this bike that's carbon. This bar is carbon. The rim is carbon. The whole frame is carbon. The water bottle cages are carbon. The pedals are carbon. The actual seat rail here is carbon. The seat post is carbon. So there's a lot of carbon parts on that.
And carbon is used because why?
Different reasons. One, primarily it's used because it's light for a cycling industry. It's very light. It's very stiff, which you want that. It's stiff and light. If you look at it from in terms of a marketing standpoint, you can make that carbon any shape you want. And usually what that means is that you can say, hey, my frame shape is faster than your frame shape. You should buy my frame shape. Where if you look at, when we brought Will's bike out here, the tubes were round. And round tube, you can't, as a bicycle manufacturer, you can't say, well, my round tube is better than your round tube. It's hard to say that.
Yeah.
So now you can say, hey, this shape of this tube, this shape of this tube is X. It's better than yours because it's different shape.
In terms of being things like more aerodynamic or things like that, I mean, you can't make steel in aerodynamic shapes, but not for bicycles, right? You can do it a little bit with aluminum, but all of the handcuffs are off with carbon. You can make it any shape that you want to make it. So these guys are wind tunnel testing and things like that, and
Right.
and it's light, and it's got this sort of weird dual thing where it's really rigid, but it also absorbs shock fairly well. And super light. Yeah, I mean, and if you've never held a carbon bike before, I mean, it's probably to the hand, it kind of feels like a hard plastic, but I mean, it's going to be a much more rigid, much more robust material.
And the way that you sort of the direction of the carbon fibers changes the ride quality.
Oh,
I didn't know
wow.
that.
Yeah. So it changes the ride quality, and the thickness of the carbon changes the ride quality. So you can make something really super stiff and make it super light, but it's going to be harsh. But then there's ways you can say, okay, let me change the direction of the carbon fibers, and it's going to give you a whole different ride characteristic.
Wow, very interesting. Well, this whole show has been very interesting. Different kinds of bikes. There's even more out there. And if any of the audience out there is thinking, well, yeah, I'd like to get a bike and I'd like to learn to ride it and get in better shape, Endeavor Performance, that's what Todd owns. It's a great place that I go to. We both go to, and it's a great place to get yourself in shape, and particularly if you're a little nervous about being outdoors. You can maybe graduate from the indoors to the outdoors on a real bike as opposed to a cycling place that's like at the Y or something like that. So I want to thank both of you for your wisdom, for educating us on the different bikes. And this is Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit. Thank you. All right.
All right,
Great.
good job.
Woo! Yay!
All right.
Yeah.
I don't know.